you Killer Wise, episode 34. Black Widow. These are the case facts against Donna Munda, who had her lover assassinate her own husband. Isn't trust a bitch? Cleveland, Ohio, famed birthplace of rock and roll. Halle Berry, but also made famous for the murder of Dr. Guillem H. Munda. This is the story of a killer wife who flew too close to the sun. She was offered a payout, but that was not enough for her. She lost all of the money. On the afternoon of May 13, 2005, prominent urologist Dr. Guillem Munda's wife pulled over his gray 2004 Jaguar XJ worth $95,000 into the emergency lane off of the Ohio Turnpike. Now, this one deviation of their journey prior to destination would prove to be deadly. Odds are that the following events that took place that afternoon on the Turnpike would never have occurred if Miss Munda hadn't insisted that she was tired. Now, when the vehicle came to a stop in that safety of the emergency lane, Dr. Munda unbuckled his seatbelt with the intent on exiting the vehicle and changing driving duties with his wife. Now, the good doctor didn't get any further now than to his feet out of the vehicle before an unknown assailant who appeared out of nowhere forced him back into the car and almost sat on top of him. But where did this man come from on such a busy traffic highway? You see, unbeknownst to the doctor, was that a black SUV had been tailing his Jaguar as a mark for the last 5 miles. Now, this car had shot him to the rear for 5 miles. But he was not aware. She should have seen this. Caught unawares, the doctor was now staring down the barrel of a loaded semi-automatic handgun. The guy, dressed in all black with a ski mask on, began to demand the doctor's wallet. This was the makings of a literal highway robbery. Dr. Munda, who didn't want any trouble or to startle the robber, let him know that he was reaching into his inner pocket to retrieve his wallet. It was then that he remembered that he did not have his wallet, but that his wife was holding it in her purse. He motioned to his wife, and she passed him the wallet, and he immediately complied with the demands of the robber. Once the robber had Dr. Munda's wallet in hand, he changed the robbery into a homicide. He did this when he decided to shoot Dr. Munda in the face at point blank range. The assailant exited the open door of the vehicle on one of the busiest turnpikes in the U.S. Now, for whatever reason, the killer elected now not to harm the 2 women that were sitting in the vehicle. See, important in the mind of a newly minted killer is usually a flawless escape from capture. Besides, he had a black ski mask on, and he knew that the women would not be able to recognize him. But left behind bleeding to death in the arms of his wailing wife was millionaire physician from Mercer County, Guillem Munda. His wife and her elderly mother flagged down drivers on the turnpike in an attempt to have police help Dr. Munda. A good Samaritan called Highway Patrol and gave them the exact mile marker of the car and where they were located. Now, Dr. Munda's wife, a former nurse herself, went immediately to CPR while talking to a combination of medics and 911 dispatchers over the phone. Now, police were dispatched to the location of the shooting, and a life flight was sent from the closest hospital to expedite the doctor to the emergency room, as he had been had given traumatic brain injuries from the bullet. Now, when the medics arrived on the scene, they still had a faint pulse on the doctor due to the efforts of his wife giving CPR. Now, Dr. Munda didn't get the chance to be airlifted to the next hospital because he died on the scene. Much later, 5 days after to be exact, after the shooting, investigators got 2 calls that led them to start looking in the right direction of the killer. One came from Pittsburgh police informant, and the second from a state policeman who had talked to Charlene McFrazier. Now, both tips led police down the same rabbit hole, and that was that Dr. Munda's loving wife had a boyfriend. This man was no ordinary boyfriend, but one who had Miss Munda as a sugar mama. You see, apparently Miss Munda was paying for all of this man's needs and wants on the doctor's dime, as she had exhausted her own savings account. You see, Miss Munda had been paying for an apartment at the Colonial Arms for him, as well as expensive jewelry, a monthly spending allowance of $7,500, and 2 vehicles she had purchased for him in her name. Now, investigative check of Donna Munda's credit history turned up the address in Colonial Arms, which Donna had used for transactions under her maiden name, Donda Smoose. Now, Donna Munda had used her maiden name to make a down payment on a Chevrolet Trailblazer she bought for her lover, Damian Bradford. Now, things are starting to line up in the case when it is determined that it was a vehicle fitting the description that pulled up behind the doctor's Jaguar prior to the shooting. Now, Miss Munda had met this man, her future long-year lover, earlier that season when she was fired from her job at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center in Greenville, Pennsylvania. She lost that coveted position she had fought hard to get with her master's degree for stealing prescription painkillers. You see, Miss Munda was charged with a felony in connection with the thefts and was placed on probation without a verdict. Now, as part of her probation, Munda began attending group therapy sessions at a drug rehabilitation center at her husband's insistence. To save the marriage, he wanted her to go into rehab. There, she met Damian Bradford, a small-time drug dealer and a felon who was in therapy also. The two first became friends and soon developed a sexual relationship. Now, Munda, who was married to wealthy urologist Gula Munda, worth between $6 to $8 million, began showering Mr. Bradford with gifts. And as I stated before, she also bought Bradford a cell phone and bought a second phone for herself so they could communicate by voice calls and text messages. Now, at some point prior to May 2005, Munda talked to Bradford about killing her husband. She told Bradford she wanted to get a divorce and that her husband had offered her $1 million to walk away from the marriage. But she refused that offer because she wanted to get what she deserved, what was owed to her in her own words.
You're watching M&N, the Men's Channel.
You see, Dr. Munda had confronted his wife months before his death about getting a divorce after being informed that she was having an affair by Mr. Bradford's fiancée, who had gotten wind of this affair. Now, it would seem that the motivation for killing Dr. Munda by his wife would be that she would inherit all of his money and properties. This was the main drive to getting him killed. Many of Dr. Munda's friends and family would wonder how a marriage that had begun as something beautiful many years earlier could end up with reporters on the couple's private lawn of 2330 Trout Island Road in Hermitage, Pennsylvania. We'll be showing you different rooms in the mansion, interspersed with actual footage of the scene of the crime and his wife's subsequent interview. The home that Dr. Munda once adored, with an estimated value of $500,000, now sits empty. From the oak doors that used to receive him to the chandeliers in each room. The living room was one of the last remaining rooms that still possessed furniture after his death. A U-shaped couch that was actually featured on a taped interview with Miss Munda did shortly after the murder.
the worst look, scared, terrified on his face in my life. They were the same height, eye to eye. He's on my husband, and he said these horrible words, and then he kind of like, I know he had to have pushed him in the seat.
We are looking at it right now as a time of opportunity. He did have a lot of cash on him.
He was a wonderful husband. He did not deserve this. Please, if anybody knows anything, please help us.
The next residents to own this property after it clears probate court would have inherited some of the most exquisite views from the many windows that wrapped around the home, the bathroom, and the backyard. We finally leave the home of the very same backyard underground driveway that the good doctor did on the morning of his assassination. Now, it never ceases to amaze me how much these killer wives lose along with their own personal freedom after engaging in trying to kill their men for money.
He stayed because in the car he dropped us off because he needed to call from his cell phone. He got a page. So he did that. We went into the restroom and on. So when we came out of the restroom, then he was waiting for us in the lobby. And then from there, we went to like the little gift shop and got water. And I kept talking to him, trying to tell him, please hang in there, please. I'm doing everything I can. I said, help's on the way. I said, help is on the way.
About a month before his assassination, Dr. Munda's wife had made plans to kill him that were not successful. So this was not the first attempt on his life. In Killer Wife series, there rarely is one attempt on a man's life. Mr. Munda's initial plan was for her lover Bradford to follow Dr. Munda to a mosque in Youngstown, Ohio, where the doctor worshiped every Friday, and to find a chance to kill him, in her own words. Now, Miss Munda made her lover an offer he could not refuse by pledging half of everything she was supposed to get, which Donna told him would be anywhere from $3 to $6 million. When Bradford could not find any opportunity to shoot Dr. Munda in the course of his travels to and from the mosque, Donna assured Bradford there was another time coming up soon. Now, this chick was a good wife. Donna told Bradford that she and Gillum were planning to visit Toledo, Ohio to look at a house Gillum's nephew intended to purchase. He needed this guy's advice. The plan was for Bradford to follow the Mundas on their drive into Ohio. Donna would at some point pull her car over to the shoulder of the road, and this would be the sign for him to pull in the back of them, ask for his wallet, and then shoot him. Thus, Bradford's job was to make the murder look like a robbery gone bad. Donna even asked Bradford to shoot her and give her a flesh wound, but he refused. Now, Friday, May 13th, 2005 was the day of the Munda's trip to Toledo. That morning, Donna called Bradford and arranged to meet him in Morovia, Pennsylvania, halfway between her home in Hermitage and his home in Aliquippa. There, Donna gave him a computer printout of their driving route. This chick, like I said, is a very good wife, but just not to her husband. Bradford returned to his apartment dressed all in black and then drove to a store near the Munda's home. While Bradford waited in the store parking lot, Donna sent him 2 dummy or signal messages stating, "I'm getting something to drink before I go, and you enjoy a beautiful day." Those were 2 messages. She says, "I will text you if I can. I love you." Now, these messages were intended to alert Bradford that the Mundas were about to depart. When the Mundas, accompanied in their vehicle by Dorothy Smoose, Donna's mother, passed by the parking lot in Gillum's champagne-colored Jaguar, Bradford pulled onto the street and followed. So he knew when they left to follow. This caravan of death eventually made its way onto the Ohio Turnpike, where the Mundas and Bradford pulled onto a Portage County Service Plaza. Miss Smoose and the Mundas went into the restroom and purchased food and drinks while the killer waited outside. Now, before she entered the plaza, Donna turned and looked directly at Bradford. She seen him. As the group got back into their vehicles, Donna assumed driving duties in their car. Approximately 30 minutes later, Donna pulled onto an emergency shoulder or berm area on the right side of the turnpike. Bradford did the same directly behind her. He exited the vehicle. Donna and Gillum also exited the vehicle and got out of their car. The plan to murder her wealthy husband went off without a hitch. That was until the investigation started. Now, Ohio Highway Patrol Trooper Brian Mercer interviewed Donna at the scene. She explained that during their stop at the Portage Service Plaza, Dr. Mooner had opened his wallet to pay for some water, but had only $50 bills. Now, Donna told the trooper that Mercer that they put the wallet away, and Miss Smoose, her mother, paid with a $5 bill. She also said that Miss Smoose commented about Dr. Mooner carrying so much money in public. She was feared for his safety. Donna told Trooper Mercer that her husband did the same thing when he was buying soup and a sandwich a short while later, and that he ended up paying for those items with a $50 bill. Donna further told Trooper Mercer that when she was pulled onto the emergency lane, she did not notice that anyone now had pulled in behind her. Even with a mirror, she didn't notice this. She claimed that as she and Gillum got out of her car to switch seats, someone ran up shouting, "Give me your wallet and get in the car." Now, Ms. Munda had been trying to establish a motive of robbery to deflect. This was nothing more than a hit for hire. This was only a hit for hire, not a robbery. Now, after Gillum handed the wallet to the man, she heard a muffled bang in her own words. Donna insisted to Mercer that she could not remember many details about the robber's appearance. She could say only that the assailant was short, dressed in all black, had a mean voice, and drove away in a black van. Now, later that evening, Donna related essentially the same story to Trooper Darren Huggins. But investigators Judy Neal of the Ohio Patrol took over the investigation of Dr. Mooner's murder. A turnpike ticket found on Dr. Mooner's revealed that the Mooners had entered the turnpike at 5:09 p.m. Now, turnpike records show that another driver entered the same type of entrance as the Mooners and exited the closest exit after the murder at 6:34 p.m. the same night. Now, this came shortly before the Highway Patrol received the call in 911. Now, Neal also obtained surveillance video footage from the Portage Service Plaza that they went to that evening and showed Donna actually possessed her husband's wallet all the time. He never had it. Further investigation of Donna led investigators to Damian Bradford. Pursuant to a search warrant on his location, they searched Bradford's apartment on May 20, 2005 and seized 2 cell phones from him. Now, the officers then obtained a court order to retrieve the call tower location that had been used on May 13, 2005 by Bradford and Munda's phones. At the same time, addressed they received a stack of $50 bills that originally rested in Dr. Munda's wallet prior to his killing. Now, using this information, investigators were able to track the movements of their phones throughout that day. The officers determined that during the late morning and afternoon hours of May 13, Bradford and Munda's phones traveled towards one another to share a common tower at a point between their prospective homes, and then traveled back to the closest to their own homes. Now, later that afternoon, Bradford's phone again began using towers progressively north on his apartment until it reached a tower in Hermitage, Pennsylvania area where Munda lived. Now, Bradford's phone was using the Hermitage Tower. Then it received Donna's text messages stating she was getting something to drink and that Bradford should enjoy a beautiful day. Now, Bradford had pretended earlier that he was nowhere near that location. Then after that, Bradford's phone made its way into Ohio, where it used the tower closer to the Portage Service Plaza, which was where Dr. Munda is getting close to being shot. This occurred at 6:04 p.m., the very time that the Mundas were seen on surveillance video purchasing drinks and snacks. Now, at 7:09 p.m., Bradford's phone used the same tower near the Portage Service Plaza, so he went back to make a loop. Now, using time distance calculations, officers determined that between 6:04 p.m. and 7:09 p.m., Bradford would have been able to drive from the Portage Plaza to exit nearest the shooting and back to the Portage Plaza. Subsequent tower information revealed that Bradford's phone was traveling east towards Pennsylvania and then used Pennsylvania's towers the rest of that night. Now, in the months following the murder investigation, citizens and law enforcement officers discovered Dr. Munda's wallet, business and credit cards, and driver's license scattered in the median and along eastbound lanes of the turnpike. Although the plan had been for Donna to deny Bradford's involvement if he got caught, she refused to testify at the trial. Now, having lost his star witness, Bradford entered a plea agreement which recommended a 210-month sentence in exchange for his truthful testimony against Donna. He was like, if you sold me out, bet I'm going to sell you out back. This is two-way street. Bradford confessed to shooting Dr. Munda, providing details of the murder plan, and told investigators where to find the gun. Following Bradford's information, investigators found a 9mm handgun between mile markers 237 and 238 on the turnpike. The gun had the word witness stamped on the side, as did a gun that Bradford's friend gave him in the year 2004. Now, although the gun's condition had deteriorated due to its prolonged outdoor exposure, testing revealed that the gun had the same rifling characteristics as the one used to shoot Dr. Munda in the face that particular night. Troopers with the Ohio State Highway Patrol used cell phone tracking records to establish that Miss Munda and Mr. Bradford met the day of the murder, which was on May 13, 2005. They also exchanged 15 text messages and 8 phone calls that one particular day. Funny for a woman who doesn't know who killed her husband. Now, until that time, her lover's trial, Miss Munda's lawyer had insisted that she had no idea Mr. Bradford was the highway robber who killed her husband. Her defense team maintained that Mr. Bradford disguised himself so thoroughly that Miss Munda did not recognize him, even though she had been seeing him romantically for 1 year. Now, for involvement in the shooting death of her husband, Donna Munda was convicted by a jury on charges of interstate stalking, resulting in her husband's death, and the following capital offenses: murder for hire and 2 counts of using a firearm during a crime of violence resulting in his death. Now, Damien, for his participation with the state, was sentenced to 17 years and was subsequently released a year earlier in April of last year. Now, Ms. Munda is still serving time for her sentence and will not be let go. Until we see you again on Killer Wives, watch who you choose as a wife. For Killer Wives, this is Charles Rivers. Thank you for watching.